Alright, so this video is to cover chapter 4, sections 4.3 to the end of 4.7. Fortunately, my smartboard has died, so we're going to sort of fudge this one by hand. Anyway, 4.3 is just increment, assignment, and decrement shortcuts. So, as you can sort of see up here, we normally have the statement items equals items plus 1. I take my items, I add 1 to it, and then I re-save it and override my previous value. But since adding by 1 is such a shorthand thing and you always do it all the time, that lets you shorthand it, so I just say items plus plus would always add 1 to my items value, and items minus minus subtracts 1. So I could have, let's say we had, what would be the value of n minus minus, n plus plus, n minus minus? Well, n minus minus subtracts 1, n plus plus adds 1, and n minus minus subtracts 1 again. So, let's make sure my mic is still working. So the overall value would be n minus 1, whatever n was when we got here. All right, section 4.4, arithmetic operations and mathematical functions. We've already seen most of your math. The one thing you have to be careful of is if you're doing division. Okay, division when both of them are numbers, and this was on that reading quiz, are integers, does cause a bit of a problem. All right. So if I, for instance, did something like, or well, let's go back up. If they're not both, so I said 7.0 divided by 4.0, that's going to give me the whole number. All right, because there's a decimal in there, so it's going to give me the entire thing. If I did one of them, and then the other one is a decimal, I am still okay. If the top one is a decimal and the bottom one is, I'm still okay. Problem I get into is if both of them are integers, I'm going to have a problem. The value of all the other ones up here is 1.75, and the computer will correctly say that to you. However, this only gives me an answer of 1. And the reason being is that it's an integer-only division. It drops off the decimal part. If I want the decimal part, I have to use this percent sign, and then it tells me only give me the remainder, okay, which is going to be, in this case, a little weird. It's like long division. It's not going to give me a decimal, it's going to give me an answer of 3, because that's what the actual remainder number is. And it doesn't sound very useful, but we will use it later on. All right, page 150 is all your math static class, all the common ones, the ones that you can do, so square root, power, sine, cosine, etc. Min and max, absolute value, things like that. So you'll use those, and again, you do something like this. If they're static methods, you don't invoke them on a class. Do something like math, absolute value of some x, something like that. You don't write like x dot absolute value. All right, 4.5 is calling static methods. All right, so for instance, like we said, if I said something like double x equals 4, and then double root equals x dot square root, this would be an error. This isn't correct. Hey, maybe this is better for you. Maybe you can see this better than my bad handwriting. So this is a mistake because there is no such thing as a square root method of a double. All right, I'm going to use the math class and call it a static method. Static method does not work on an object, okay? So it has to be a parameter. So I could say something like double root equals math dot absolute value of my parameter x. That would work correctly and save the absolute value of x in the, or square root, or whatever I want to do, into my root. All right, now we're getting into section 4.6, page 158, strings. All right, we're going to use strings a lot. Remember, it's not a primitive type, it is an object. A string is a sequence of characters, such as the letters hello world. And in Java, strings are enclosed in quotation marks, which are not themselves part of the string. Note that, unlike numbers, strings are objects. This is all on page 158. Okay, you can do a few things, like we've already done something like computing the length. So int n equals message length if message was a string. And it has other things it can do, to uppercase, to lowercase, all sorts of things like that. I can do what's called concatenation, which is to put strings together. So if I had something like string name equals David, and then string message equaled, I hate this tiny little keyboard. I don't know how you Mac people do it. Hello plus name. Message now is hello David. It will stick them together. Alright, so the plus operator concatenates two strings, provided one of the expressions, either left or the right of the plus sign, is a string. The other one is automatically forced to become a string as well, and then they're both stuck together. Okay. Like Marshall said, it is useful to sort of chop up the number of, this is one way it's useful to chop up the number of system mounts I got to use. Okay. One problem is that if I have an integer in part of a string, I can't get it out. So if you have a number that you want usually to use your input, for example, you have a string input as a value of the string 19. To get the integer value 19, you have to use the static parseInt method of the integer class. So it's static, so it doesn't operate on anything, but I would have to save it int count, let's say, equals integer.parseInt input. And well, let's just say that input was the string 19 from, say, a text box or something like that. Then I would need to turn it into a number that I can actually work with. Alright, parse int, parse double. And then remember what we're talking about today, substring. It's a method of the string class. So in general, it's of the form substring start past end. Goes up to but not including that last one. Okay. So let's say we did something like string greeting equals hello world. And then I said string sub equals greeting dot substring 05. Remember, I always start counting at 0. And it goes up to but not including that fifth one. So in this case, sub equals the string hello. Because while there are 5 letters, the last one is actually in position number 4. If you omit the second parameter of a substring, it just did something like greeting substring 5. That starts at 5 and goes until the end. Alright, last little bit, 4.7, reading input. So not using a text box, but getting the console. So we have our scanner class, which you do have to import. So your import's going to be import java.util.scanner. And then you're going to do your work. And like I said, we're always going to just say scanner in equals new scanner. And we'll pass it the system in parameter. So this is your header that you're always going to use. Remember, we do have a few things. Alright, next int, next double, next, and next line. Next int assumes that the value given is an integer and it stores it as such. Next double assumes that it's a double. Next is a next string to the next white space. That is an enter or a space, tab, something like that. And next line takes the whole thing until they hit enter. So for instance, I could do something like system out. Now again, we're going to do print instead of println usually, so that doesn't drop below. So something like enter your city. Alright, and then I would say string city equals in.next line. And I would do that because the city could be a name, like more than one name, like New York has a space in it, so you wouldn't want it to just take new. And then something like system out print enter state code. So enter your zip code. Now, if I did it like this, it's going to save it as a string, even if I put numbers in. And if I want it to be not numbers later, I'm going to have to use the parseInt method to change it. Alright, so the Chapter 4, page 166, the tutorial wants you to look at, again, the cash register class, and then modify it. So we just have our basic cash register here, and then modify it to accept user input. So I've got cash register, new cash register, give change. So here's my normal one, which just hard codes the numbers in. You don't let the user do it, you did it by hand here. So we're going to sort of change that in the simulator. Oops. First, here's my import. Import's a keyword, so it turns into red. Public static void main, so I make an object of my scanner class, make a cash register, so now those are both there and I can now use the methods. Enter the price, save the price, and then pass it to my register as a purchase. Print, enter dollars, enter quarters, enter dimes, enter nickels. Save them all in unique ones. Pass it to my enter payment method, and then print the change by asking the register to give me change as a return method. So it would look something like this. Enter the price, $10. Enter. Enter the number of dollars, 10. Enter quarters, 0. Enter dimes, 1. Oops, enter nickels, 0. Enter pennies, 0. Your change, and again, because of its of double imprecision, it comes out as essentially rounded to 1.0. We're not going to really worry about that too much for now. And that ends chapter 4.7. Now the last thing that I wanted you to show you was number 4.4 that you had to do for your homework today. And like I said, you can, if you want, do it all in one in your main class. But here's what it should look like. Yeah, you don't have to make a separate pair class, although that's actually a little easier. But so if I were to enter a number 2 and then enter another number 5, so the sum of them, here's what it should print out. The sum is 7, the difference is -3, product is 10, the average is 3.5, the distance between them is 3, the maximum number I typed in was 5, and the minimum number was 2. Alright, so that's what it should do. It should ask for the first and second number, which is what it does here. It should save them and then pass them in. To finish the assignment correctly, you pass it into your constructor. It has two numbers, so you're going to need two instance fields, number 1 and number 2. And then each one of these is a return statement like it shows on page 175. Public double get sum. Well, in that case, I would return. And is my notepad open? You can do it all in one line. So for instance, public double get sum, no parameters because I already saved them in my constructor, and I would just say return x plus y if that was the names of my two instance fields. And that's all I have to do. You can do the math all in the same line. Okay? So that is chapter 4.